Hey, it's Drybear. I've been dormant for a little bit, working on a new setup for my machines and recording setup and all that, but Diablo 4 Season 2 has been a blast. And today I want to talk about a very easy way to reference the endgame bosses that exist now in Season 2 and how easy the loot is to get so you have a quick reference for yourself. I put together this quick sheet that you can use as a reference. This has all of the bosses in the game, where you get the materials for them, and what loot you'll get from killing them as well as something that I didn't know had already existed, but each of the endgame bosses in Diablo 4 Season 2 have their own unique cosmetics that they can drop. Most notably, Grigoire can drop mount armor, and Duriel can drop a whole mount himself, which looks pretty awesome. I've separated the list into classes, and then all classes, and then the cosmetics. You can see for the boss itself and the class that you're playing, which one you might want to use, and what loot you're looking for specifically, all in one sheet. And as per usual, I'll leave a link to this sheet in the description down below and in the comments as well. Now, if you're someone who's just joining in for Season 2, I'll go through each of the bosses, how you get their loot, things you should know, and where to actually summon the boss itself. Starting with the Beast in the Ice, you get a special material called Distilled Fear by completing any Nightmare dungeon at 30 or higher. And in my experience, this is actually the hardest material to get, because it doesn't seem to be anywhere near a 100% drop rate. In my worst drop scenarios, I was required to do basically 2 or 3 dungeons to get a single Distilled Fear, and on World Tier 4, you need 9 of them to summon the Beast in the Ice a single time, which means that I was having to do anywhere from 15 to 20 Nightmare dungeons in order to get it. Now, as you push higher, I haven't really been able to measure whether it gets better on the drop rate. Even in the high Nightmares, I haven't really been able to see that it gets every single time. But you just have to be running any single Nightmare dungeon at 30 or higher, and you'll unlock the Distilled Fear. Once you have 9 of them, you'll go to the Occultist and craft a Glacier Nightmare Dungeon Sigil that you'll use to activate just like any other Nightmare Dungeon Sigil. And when you go inside, it'll be a brief ice dungeon, and when you get to the end, it will be the Beast in the Ice. The mechanics here are pretty straightforward. If you fought Albion in Lost Ark, there's a lot of similarities between how the fight is set up here and how that works. And then you'll kill him off, and then just like every other boss in the game, all you have to do is leave the dungeon and reset in order to start again, and you'll open another Nightmare Sigil. And he's actually the only boss that is opened with a consumable item in your inventory rather than going to a pedestal and putting in the materials yourself. Of course, that item looks like this, Distilled Fear. Again, all you have to do is complete any Nightmare Dungeon tier 30 plus to get these, get 9 of them, go to the Occultist and craft it, and you're good to go. Next is Lord Zir, which is the antagonist of the Season 2 storyline for Diablo 4. He is the old vampire. I always think about Bloodborne when I hear him. We are unmade by the blood. So he is the big vampire boss, and you'll find him at the very end of the storyline for the season, which means if you haven't completed the seasonal quest line and you're wondering where Zir is, you do have to finish the whole seasonal quest line, which isn't all that long, in order to unlock his fight. To summon him, you need Exquisite Blood, which is a resource that drops from Legion events and world bosses, and a few other minor places that are kind of rare but do drop there. But the primary are going to be Legion events and world bosses. Once you have 9 of these Exquisite Bloods, you can go to the ancient seat here, which is the Apotheosis, which is the darkened way on the map that you'll unlock through the storyline. Come here, go to the pedestal, use the 9 Exquisite Blood and summon him, kill him off, and he'll have the same drops on that table that I mentioned and showed earlier. Exquisite Blood looks like this. You'll get it pretty commonly if you're doing world bosses, and I would recommend doing world bosses because they drop guaranteed max eye level loot, which is a great way to get best in slot gear now in Season 2. And of course, you will find this in the darkened way on the map. Here on the inside of the Fractured Peaks area. This one is only available once you finish the quest line for seasonal, and so that is there. And by the way, this is Glacial Fissure. The only reason I didn't show it before is because once you open the Nightmare Dungeon and you press tab to open your map, it'll take you there automatically. This is the only one that you don't have to physically go there, because you can still teleport to Nightmare Dungeons, and this counts as a Nightmare Dungeon as Glacial Fissure. Next is going to be the boss of Season 1, Varshan, returning as an Echo in Season 2, and he's by far the easiest one to unlock. Anytime you complete a Whisper cache, inside that cache you will get Malignant Hearts, which is the limiting factor in most cases for summoning Varshan. But you also need 3 other pieces in order to summon him. You just get so many of them out in the world doing the Blood Tides, which is the Blood Harvest, If you do that enough, you'll usually be limited by Malignant Hearts, which only come from the Whisper caches. And luckily enough, you summon him at the Whisper tree. So if you go over to the Tree of Whispers and go down here, the Malignant Burrow is the summoning location for him. And again, you need to complete Whisper caches pretty much to get Malignant Hearts, which is the pieces that we had in Season 1. And this is the big limiter. Now, it does require one of each of these, a Trembling Hand, a Gurgling Head, and a Blackened Femur. So you do need those. But in my experience, you get so many of these from the deaders that spawn all over the world. The deaders for the season can spawn on inside of the PvP areas, on world bosses, random elites, in Helltide. They're everywhere. So if you see a deader, kill them. You'll usually get one of these resources to drop. And then on top of that, if you do world bosses and everything else, it'll drop there as well. And if you do Blood Tide or the Blood Harvest, you will still get tons of these as part of that process anyways. However, the Malignant Hearts drop the least out of all of these, and you require one of each in order to get these. And keep in mind, you can go to the Alchemist to create these. If you have two, say I have, like right now I have 14 Blackened Femurs, I can go to the Alchemist and use these to create more Gurgling Heads or more Trembling Hands to try and balance that out. And then the Malignant Hearts, you're just going to have to be doing Whispers constantly in order to get this stacked up. Now, this is where things get a little more complicated, because the first two bosses we mentioned, Lord Zir and Beast in the Ice, are singular bosses that have their own gameplay loop. You farm the materials, you summon them, you get them. However, the final boss, the ultimate endgame boss in Season 2, which is Duriel, requires materials that are earned from killing Varshan and killing the next boss we're going to talk about, Grigoire. You actually have to be killing these regularly in order to get a special material from them. And since the initial onset of Season 2, a couple balance patches have been put out on how these materials are acquired and traded. So as of right now, at the making this video, you only get the summoning materials from these bosses if you're the one that summoned the boss. So if someone else summoned it in your group, you won't get an extra sticky mucus egg. You'll have to actually just summon it yourself in order to get it, which I think is a fair system. So if you're the one to summon Varshan inside his Malignant Burrow in World Tier 4, it can't be World Tier 3, it has to be max World Tier. You'll get the Mucus Slick Egg from him. You get one per summon, so you just need one heart and one of these three pieces, one of each of these three pieces, and you got a Mucus Slick Egg. And each time you summon Duriel, it requires 2, which means you're going to need 2 Varshans and 2 Grigoires every time you summon the Duriel, the final boss of the season. Next is Grigoire, and you earn his materials, the Living Steel, by completing Helltides out in the world. And there's actually a specific chest that you need to open in order to get the Living Steel. You need 5 Living Steel in order to summon him, and you get 3 per chest in Helltide on World Tier 4, and there's less but the same ratio for World Tier 3 as well. So you basically need to open 2 of these secret chests in Helltide to get enough Living Steel to summon Grigoire once. He does drop a shard that you get just like the Mucus Slick Egg, you will use 2 of in order to summon Duriel. So again, you need to kill Grigoire twice, kill Varshan twice, and be the person who summoned him to the area. Finish him off, get the material, and then you can summon Duriel one time. And what's cool about this is none of the bosses despawn if you fail and die. You can just walk right back in and try again. It'll consume the materials one time to summon him, and he'll just be there when you come back in, so you can just try and try again. But you will have to do Helltides pretty often, and keep in mind that this event goes every other hour. It's not like the Blood Harvest where it's up every single hour. And so if you're looking to farm Uber Uniques from Duriel, get some of the new loot, or even just get max eye level loot that comes from him, you have to be doing Helltides regularly. This is probably one of the most limiting aspects of this, is just doing Helltides over and over religiously and taking all of your cinders and using them on the special chest. Now, I've covered this in previous videos, and there's tons of resources online that you can use to help track chest locations during a Helltide. The one I still find myself going back to is helltides.com. We'll put a link down below in the description and in the comments. And so previously, the way it worked is you would always be going for these mystery chests. They would cost 250 of these cinders, and you get great loot and materials and crafting and re-rolling resources, things like that, and it was the best way to use it. However, now we have these living steel chests that you need in order to actually loot the living steel and summon Grigoire, which allows you to summon Duriel. And so using these resources, they all should be updated now to show the living steel chests. They're usually pretty close to the mystery chests in many cases, but you do want to get these. And these do cost 300 cinders, though at the making this video, there does seem to be a bug where you can open these for 280. They'll probably fix that before this video is even watched by anyone, but just be aware that that is there. So you want to find these chests, go to them, and activate them. And when you arrive, there usually will be a big giant demon that's blocking the chest. All you have to do is go up to the living steel chest, click on it, you'll fight with the demon, and when you're done, you can then go spend and update it. But if there's, someone came before you and killed the demon, you can usually just walk up to the chest and open it. Sometimes they'll spawn in the middle of it, but the tortured gift of living steel, these are the chests that you want to open in order to get the living steel to drop out. And again, on World Tier 4, it will drop 3 each time, and you need 5 total in order to summon Grigoire once. Lastly, you will take the shards and the eggs that you got from Varshan and Grigoire, and you'll come to Duriel's location, the Gaping Crevasse, which should be on your map just like all the other summoning locations. Walk in, clear your way to the pedestal, and use 2 eggs and 2 of the shards to summon Duriel. Now, I'll give you a primer on this. Duriel is definitely the hardest fight in this series, but there's a couple ways that you can make this fight actually pretty straightforward and easy if you're well prepared. Keep in mind that the vast majority of all the damage that he does is poisons. You want to be not only maxed on your poison resistance, but you also want to increase your maximum poison so that you can actually deal as much damage to him without having to worry about the AoEs. You also just generally want to do the mechanics properly. Avoid him coming out of the burrows. Avoid the charge if you can, or use immunities or other ways to get around it. And just keep good damage on him as well. And don't let the secondary Duriel spawns live for too long, as sometimes they can do a lot of damage, especially if your resistances and armor are not up to snuff. The Gaping Crevasse is down in the south of Kyrgyzstan. So on the bottom left of the map, you'll come down here and enter into this, and this is where you summon Duriel. And again, the majority of his attacks do poison damage. You want a green number here. You want to, without any buffs, be flat 70% at your poison resistance, and you want to increase that as much as you can. There's 2 essence or incenses that you can pick up that are actually super useful for this fight. The first one is going to be Storm of the Wilds. This gives you lightning, cold, and poison resistance 15% and increases the maximum for 2% for each nearby player. So if you're doing a group, you can do up to 8% maximum resistance, which is massive. And even if you're at 70%, you'll increase the max by 8 for a full party, or 2 by yourself, and then you'll instantly get to that cap with the extra 15% that's on here as well. The other one that's super useful is Soothing Spices, which does stack with Storm of the Wilds. This increases resistance to all elements by 10%. So even if you're not at the 70% cap for poison, you can increase it up to this cap, and then you increase the max cap as well, and increases resistance to all elements by 1, the maximum. So even if you're by yourself, that's 3% extra poison resistance, plus it gives armor, which is super useful. You want to use both of these to make sure that you can get to at least 75 to 85% poison resistance, and it's going to make the fight a whole lot easier for you. And that's what I've got for you today. Those are the 5 endgame bosses. This is the sheet. I just want to let you guys know that I'm back. I was working on a new setup, a new rig, everything going on for my computers and everything, so it took a little while to get it working, but we're back, and we're back in business. So I'll post all this up for you. It'll be down below in the description and in the comments. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you in the next one. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.